When I had cancer, I really felt like my body had betrayed me. And then when I found out I was pregnant with Hunter, literally the instant that I looked at the test and saw I was pregnant, I just felt like I felt healed. I felt like the body that had created cancer had healed and created this human life. And I couldn't live in fear of cancer and be a mother, and for
Right
me.
there.
And so that just started my path to just trying to learn how to navigate the crisis in my life and not let it take over my life.
Sylvia and me.
Hi, I'm Lisa Bradshaw. I'm happy to be here with you today. I am the founder of a nonprofit called the Don't Wait Project, and I'm also the host of my own show called Life with Lisa Bradshaw, where I'm from in Wenatchee, Washington. I'm happy to be on Sylvia and Me.
Lisa, thank you so much. And we actually met in person, not on Zoom, a few weeks ago when you interviewed me for your show, Life with Lisa, and your Don't Wait Project, your tour that you're doing. I would really like to get into some of...
When I had cancer, I really felt like my body had betrayed me. And then when I found out I was pregnant with Hunter, literally the instant that I looked at the test and saw I was pregnant, I just felt like I felt healed. I felt like the body that had created cancer had healed and created this human life. And I couldn't live in fear of cancer and be a mother, and for me.
There.
And so that just started my path to just trying to learn how to navigate the crisis in my life and not let it take over my life.
Well, that showed strength that you wound up going into that well ever since.
Yeah, there is a well. It gets low sometimes. I don't live my life every day with this perfectly in mind, but I most definitely do my best to live from a don't wait point of view, and losing Wesley especially taught me that.
And you lost him, your son was about 4 years old.
Yeah, my son, Wesley got sick the week of Hunter's 4th birthday, and he died. So he cleaned out an old cabinet in our garage that made him sick, and he was hospitalized many times throughout the year. And then the next year, a year to the anniversary of him cleaning the garage, he received a double lung transplant, and he died 6 weeks later on Easter. So our son turned 5 while Wesley was in the ICU after surgery.
So
now he's 23.
You've had tragedy, healing, tragedy. And yet what you're doing right now is you're helping others tell their stories. What actually gave you that courage and that gumption to move ahead and do that?
I think a lot of it is making sure, for one, that my son is very familiar with his father. And also, there isn't a life for me without Wesley. I couldn't imagine not having him. So he's in our lives still, and we talk about him, and the work I do is largely in honor of him and his memory. So for me, it was the only way. And also I started hosting a radio show back in 2008, and Wesley died in 2004. And I think starting to share the stories of others is what started to heal my own story. The focus was off of me so much, but yet I could have a conversation with someone like you who's been through her own hardship, and we can relate. And so these conversations become, people come on my show or we have discussions, and they're uncomfortable at first or think they don't have a story. And then next thing you know, it's 30 minutes later and they realize they do. And it doesn't matter if you travel the country and interview people or do what you're doing, host a podcast. If you're living your story, whether you're telling it or not, that's your way of telling it. You don't have to stand on a TED stage to do that. And so people can glean inspiration, and you can be a cautionary tale, or you can be, an inspiration to people. And I try to be the latter.
Well, as you said, everyone has a story, even though they may not realize it. Mm-hmm. Some are afraid to tell it. Some think it's too, it's too minor to talk about. And that's why the ability to tell stories and kind of get people to open up and talk and be able to have a conversation, it's just, it's powerful. And you have 4 nouns that you talk about: people, places, things, and ideas. Tell us how they kind of come into how you've done, where it relates to Don't Wait.
Well, I was writing my second book, Big Shoes, and it's largely pretty much entirely based on Wesley's year-long illness and the 7 years after that. And I was up many nights writing. I set a 4-month deadline to finish that book, to start and finish it. And I was really nearing the end, starting to think about the reader and how much some of Wesley's own family would start to understand the magnitude of that year. Because if you didn't live in our home, you didn't know. My mom would be the only person I'd say that really gleaned it, because she spent only 3 months of that year with my dad. The most of the time was with us helping with Hunter. And so I started thinking about the reader and their dedication, their empathy to the 382 pages of our story. And I woke up one morning about 5:30 in the morning, and I started thinking, well, what if I started a project or created an idea or planted a seed, whatever it was going to become, I didn't know yet, to get people not to wait to do what's important. Because I told Hunter very early on, our son, when he was 5, there's a really big reason why your dad isn't here. And I have no idea what that is. It'll be the first thing I learn when I pass out of this life. But in the meantime, it's my job as your mom to bring whatever greatness we can, not in spite of losing him, but because of it. And so the Don't Wait project really became a way to say, let's not treat it like a bucket list. If I died tomorrow, what would I do? Because I always say, like, you and I wouldn't be sitting here talking. We would be with our family. We would be doing something completely different. So instead, let's assume we have 100 years. What are we doing with that time? And I've interviewed thousands of people over the last decade plus, about 12 years now, 14 years now, actually. And I just feel like our values help determine our story. And if we can put value in the nouns in life, like really make them verbs, right? The people and the places and the things and the ideas, those are important. And we give up on them along the way sometimes. We get too tired, too sad, too busy, too comfortable. And we have to revisit what we wanted for ourselves. And hopefully that's community, and hopefully that's giving back, and hopefully it's taking care of ourselves. And just, I truly believe if we take care of our own little corner of the world, the world gets a lot better.
Yes, it does. And that's the whole thing that people don't understand. If we do take care of our little corner of ourselves and those around us,
Right.
we make a big difference.
Right.
Because that's what you've done. And from there, it's evolved into something larger, touching more people. And that's another thing that people don't understand, that one touch goes to another, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, the ripple effect. And I like to think that the ripple started with Wesley. And so anyone who hears our story or hears a story that I've helped share, it all goes back to, that's the way I keep Wesley on the planet. There's just no other way for me. I still could tear up now. It's been 18 years. It's just the way it is.
Yes. And that's what a lot of people don't understand, where they'll say, it's been 18 years. Why are you tearing up now? It's been so long. And I know you have,
I don't think anyone would dare say that to me, but maybe behind my back.
But you
Right?
have you have another big event happening. Your son Hunter,
Yes.
Isn't he off to college?
He's graduated in May. He's already out in the world. Yeah, he graduated in May. I gave my TED talk when he was in college. And I have to say, for the parents out there who are empty nesters and struggling with it, Whew, that was painful. It was really a hauntingly familiar grief when he left home. It was the end of something that I couldn't bring back. Nothing would be the same, and yet it was this happy time. So I felt pretty guilty about feeling that way. And I kept a lot of it to myself. But I would say clinical depression probably for the good months after he first left home. I hid it from him. I hid it well. I've learned how to do that, which isn't the healthiest way to go about it. But I did get the help I needed again. I have people in my pocket who I pay money to listen to me talk over the years when I need help. But that was a time when I did have to get help again. And it's the chin up thing, but boy, it gets hard sometimes,
Look, you're talking about it now.
Yeah.
You're helping people by being able to talk about it, to be out there and say that you were depressed, that it hit you again, and you went and found help, and now you can talk about it.
Yeah.
So right now, by saying that, you're helping quite a number of people who, feel guilty about it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a huge proponent of getting the help you need, and I believe too, and I had a grief counselor, and then I went in a different direction to a very no nonsense counselor that I have, that he's really blunt with me. And, I can tend to take over a situation, and I need someone who won't let me do that. And so, I see him intermittently, but I have his number and I can get into him whenever I need him. And I think it's important to have that set up in our lives. We might not need it I can go years without talking to him. But some trigger like Wesley, and not, like the rites of passage he misses when Hunter graduates high school and then college, or a big baseball game he won. I never know what the trigger is. I never know what the trigger is.
You've also coined empathetic healthcare practice. Can you describe exactly what you mean by that?
Well, I do a lot of work in patient advocacy now, and I have to be honest, this has been work in my life I've avoided. I'm just going to be honest. The idea of being in people's crisis has not appealed to me at all, because what ended up happening after Wesley passed away several years later, my mom was sick and she was misdiagnosed, and it took all that I learned, surviving cancer, navigating Wesley's death. It saved my mother's life. No doubt about it. It helped save her life. And when that happened, I thought, okay, I'm getting that nudge. Like, you're supposed to do something with this. God's telling me, what are you doing? Like this, you could help people in this way. And so I speak at conferences. I give a keynote that's largely about our story and the providers who have been in our lives, and the good ones and the not so good ones. And I try to teach people that you don't have to, have a super best friend relationship with your surgeon, but you better make sure your primary care physician cares about you. You don't have to love the nurse in a hospital stay, but you better make sure that person wants to come in and out of the room when you're in there, because somebody else is always already giving them a hard time down the hall. And so I've just taken all of the stories of the last 25 years between my cancer, Wesley's illness, and my mom's, and created what I call empathetic healthcare. And there's many facets to it, but it's just trying to educate people also about building a team you trust and taking responsibility for your care. And if you have a physician that you don't trust or respect, then you better get a new one, because the most important thing, I think, in healthcare, top 5 things, is compliance. And how can you comply with people you don't trust? So that's the message usually that I try to get across, is if we build a team we trust, it's like signing up for chemo. I was 24 years old. I was terrified. And then when I finished chemo, I had to do radiation, and I was really terrified of that. I mean, I'd seen the movie Silkwood, I was afraid. And, but I made a very specific decision, and I stuck by that decision, and I followed all the rules. And 26 years later, I'm here. And I just think, I've interviewed people who've had organ transplants for 15, 20 years, people who've overcome things multiple times, illnesses, cancers, and they're here because, you can't keep an organ for 15 years if you're not compliant. You just can't.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm basically speechless because what you said, no, that's fine. Believe me, I find my words somehow. But what you said is so important. And yeah, being compliant, it's just like anything else. You break a leg, if you don't do what you're supposed to do, you're not going to get back in shape. And if you don't go in being an advocate for yourself, or surrounding yourself with people who are going to be that advocate for you, good things aren't going to happen. You
Mhm.
have to take ownership
Yes.
of your
And
own
it can
health.
improve outcomes. It really can. It
Yes.
can save lives. Not everyone can be saved. I know
No.
this. I worked just as hard for Wesley as I did my mom. But what I know for sure is I was able to leave both of those situations knowing I was heard, knowing we left no stone unturned. And my mom is here. She made a full recovery. It's 6 years later. Sometimes I look at her and I still can't believe she's here.
Well,
So that's when, and I was sitting in the ICU with my dad. My mom was fine one day and coughing blood the next. And I won't get into all the details, but it got scary really fast. And she was in the ICU that night. And I was there with my dad. And my parents had been married by then, 47 years or something. And I just, all the familiars talk about a trigger, all the familiar sounds of the ICU and the hushed people in the hallway and the monitors and the drips and it was overstimulating for me. And I said to my dad that night, I said, Mom doesn't want me here. She was in a medically induced coma for the night. And I said, she doesn't want me here. She wants me to be with Hunter at home. This is your job. This is your in sickness and health. This is your for better, for worse. And if I do it for you, you and Mom will miss something you're supposed to learn, not just about taking care of her, but in your marriage and your life and this path in the world. So I'm not going to do it for you, but I'll teach you every single thing I know. And that's the conversation we had that night. And if I can teach my dad, that's what made me feel. He's a very smart man, but he wasn't used to, he's not of the generation where he's going to learn a whole lot from, someone telling him how to do something, but he did. He really listened and he really learned. And now they pull me in when they need my help, but otherwise they take care of themselves. And so that's when I really started. That's the work I'll be doing for the next 5 or 10 years, is really just, I have some ideas and some things that I'm working on that I think will allow me to reach out to the masses, but not be in their crisis. Gift them these tools,
yeah, exactly.
and then keep going with my life.
So let's get back to the Don't Wait Project.
Okay.
It's a nonprofit. How did you go about even starting this, and why? Because on the Don't Wait Project, you've interviewed so many people, you've taken a cinematographer, you've traveled throughout the United States, you did a tour in 2018-19, and then you started another one just recently, which you just recently finished.
Mhm.
Tell me, which I am very proud to be able to
Yes.
say that
Yes.
I'm one of the people that will be in it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I really enjoyed talking with you, and it's such a fascinating thing to learn of all these stories. My goal is always to interview multiple people with multiple stories, and hopefully someone watching will find the one that speaks to them. And the Don't Wait Project. So in 2008, I started my radio show, and I had been on Rachael Ray and Oprah Radio and in magazines and things for a different company that I had years before. And so when my first book came out, there was a man named John St. Augustine who had a radio show. And I was on that show multiple times. Of all the shows I've done over the years, he's one of the few people, I'm still in touch with. And he was producing Oprah Radio, I think when it was on XM back then. So I flew out and did a couple shows there, and he was saying, why aren't you a host? Why aren't you doing something? And I said, and I told myself, okay, in a year, I'll have a radio show. And a year went by, and another month, another 2 months. And this was back in 2008, before the Don't Wait Project. And so I ended up going to look one day thinking, okay, this has been a year and 2 months. Get on the ball, Lisa. So I looked in our local, I don't know, probably the yellow pages back then. I don't know how I found it. Maybe the internet. I'm not sure. 2008. Yeah. Internet. And I found a talk station here in our community that was like 90 years old, terrestrial radio, real AM talk radio. And so I reached out to the GM and he said, yes, can you be here at 10 tomorrow? And I thought, oh no. So I quickly put together a demo, and I hadn't interviewed anyone. All I had was, some good interviews that I'd done with other people where I'd been on the receiving end of that.
Sure.
And I don't know, he summed me up early in the meeting, and he had an idea to bring someone in to do community relations and just make sure we're out in the community, that someone's attending all the events and partnering businesses with nonprofits. And he created that position for me. We created it together. And then he dangled the carrot of the show for me. So I started hosting the show then. And so when I had the idea 3 years later for the Don't Wait Project, I now had all these wonderful relationships with all these businesses and these people in the community that I'd worked with and partnered with over the last 3 years, that I went to them with a one sheet and said, I have this idea and I need help funding it. What do you say? And they all but one said yes. So I raised thousands of dollars it ended up being, I formed a publishing company. I'm proud to say I self-published my book. You look at it and you don't know it. I did all the things, hired a designer, the cover designer, the inside designer, hired an editor, started my own imprint. And the book belonged to the Don't Wait Project. All the profits go to the Don't Wait Project. And they always have. And meanwhile, I also was able to get the trademarking and everything done under that umbrella of launching a nonprofit organization and doing it with the book. And it was this community that did it. And now it's Town Toyota here in our community that sponsors the tours, that I get to go and travel and interview all of these people. And it's just grown from that one sheet and an idea the community trusted me with to my getting to meet you in Connecticut last month.
Well, I'm very happy about that. Can I ask, did you always, when you on this one sheet, was it always going to be a nonprofit?
Yes, always. I had wanted to start a nonprofit for a long time. I had some ideas early on, and yes, and honestly, more and more, I wanted to found my own after working with so many fantastic nonprofits, nationally and locally here in our community. After being on steering committees or helping with event planning, just knowing the importance of it. And I try to focus a lot on that in my work too, making sure that I offer visibility to those folks as well.
Well, I am so glad you did, because as you just said, we got to meet.
Yes.
And we meet so many different people. And that's the thing, to not pigeonhole yourself into a specific genre or subtopic or something. You're able to bring out things in people that you didn't even, we started off by saying that people didn't even know. And sometimes we wind up finding pieces of ourselves in some of those stories.
I'm giving a talk to a group of high school seniors, about to go out into the world. And all I wanted to do was be an author. And I figured out real fast that unless I'm Brene Brown or somebody, I'm not going to be able to feed my kid and feed my soul and as an author. So I found little ways, I call them buckets of passion. This is if it feeds my kid and feeds my soul. Of course, my kid's off the payroll now. He graduated college, but when he was growing up, it was really important to me to still be home when he got home from school every day, and all of these different ideas I had that Wesley and I had about how we wanted to raise him. And so I feel like having those opportunities to tell stories, figure out what I wanted to do with my life, all the forks in the road. That's what I want to share with these students. If I'd stuck to the idea, now we have a friend, Wendy Walker, who stuck to the idea that she wanted to become an author and she wanted that to be her job. And she and I discussed that as well, but our best-selling author friend, that I didn't want it bad enough. I wanted to be a storyteller. It didn't have to be through books. Now I've written a couple and I'll write probably a couple more, but I just want people to understand that you can start off thinking you want to be one thing or do one thing. And as long as you're willing to take those forks in the road and take a hiatus if you have to, take a pause if you feel overwhelmed or you have questions about what's next for you, but most definitely know that nothing's set in stone. You know, every idea I had, the first book I wrote, it didn't matter if I made any money. Wesley was paying the mortgage. I was pretty okay with that. You know, I was really okay with the roles that we'd set up for ourselves. And then I was a widowed single mom all of a sudden. I had to figure it out.
Very quickly too.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Lisa, thank you so much. Where can people get more information about you and the Don't Wait Project and Life with Lisa and everything you're doing?
The easiest place is my website, lisa-bradshaw.com. And then I'm on Instagram, Life with Lisa Bradshaw.
Well, Lisa, again, it's been such a great pleasure meeting you. And,
yes, thank you for having
talking
me.
again.
Yes, thank you. Keep up the good work yourself.
Thanks. You can find us on all of your popular podcast platforms. And of course, our website, sylviame.com. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay tuned.